Imagine for a second that you are staring at a completely blank whiteboard. You have dry erase marker in your hand, and your task isn't just to, plan out your week or redesign your living room.
Right.
Your task is to redesign human society from the ground up. Like every rule, every norm, every single way we interact with each other, you just wipe it clean and start over.
I mean, it is a massive undertaking, and frankly, it's a little terrifying. Because usually when we try to fix society's problems, we're just tinkering around the edges, right? We pass a new law or, we tweak an economic policy, maybe adjust the tax rate, but we rarely take an eraser to the fundamental building blocks of how we actually live, breathe, and coexist.
But today, we're looking at someone who did exactly that. So welcome to our deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack a highly specific, totally fascinating blueprint for a utopian community.
It really is fascinating.
We are looking at excerpts from a 2007 document written by Sue Feng. It is titled 80 FAQs Concerning the Home Without Marriage and Family, and it outlines the core principles of a movement called Lifechanyuan.
And this document, it's structured literally as a Q&A. It is a systematic, brick-by-brick teardown of secular life, replaced with a completely alternative way of existing. I mean, it tackles everything from how you work, to who you love, to who raises your children.
Now, before we get into the weeds here, I need to put a giant asterisk on this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about some very radical social ideas today, ideas that completely deconstruct marriage, family, and the global economy.
Oh, yeah. Very radical.
Right. So we are not endorsing these viewpoints, and we aren't here to judge them either. Our goal is strictly to report on and explore the ideas contained in this original source material. So for you, the listener, we're looking at this purely as a thought experiment.
Exactly. Especially if you're someone who loves exploring multiple perspectives, this is a chance to see how a group tries to completely re-engineer human society. It's a window into a very different kind of logic. And, exploring that logic helps us understand why our own society is built the way it is.
Right. So before we can talk about what daily life actually looks like inside this utopia, we have to understand the velvet rope at the entrance. Like, who actually gets to live in the home without marriage and family? Because according to the text, it is absolutely not an open-door policy.
Not at all. The document explicitly states that entry is reserved for the most civilized and the best of humanity. It uses this highly vivid agricultural metaphor, calling the entry process gathering the ripened crops.
Gathering the ripened crops. Wow. That implies that people have to reach a certain stage of evolutionary or spiritual development before they can even be considered. You aren't just a seed anymore. You've fully bloomed.
Yes, exactly. You cannot just walk in off the street because you think a commune sounds fun. The text says you must be baptized by Lifechanyuan value. And this is not just a theoretical belief system where you read a pamphlet and nod along. It requires demonstrable action.
Yeah.
You have to have devoted all your energies to the construction of Lifechanyuan for at least half a year before you are even eligible.
What does being baptized by Lifechanyuan value actually mean in practice? What is the baseline requirement there?
Well, in the context of this document, it means you have completely shed your secular conditioning. You no longer view yourself through the lens of your job title, your bank account, or your traditional family roles.
So you're basically a new person.
Right. You have aligned yourself with a completely new set of universal principles. The ultimate goal, according to the source, is for these members who are referred to as genuine celestials to experience the life of celestials in the 1,000-year world.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the logistics of actually running a community of these so-called celestials immediately makes me scratch my head. I mean, if you have a society, you have rules. And if you have rules, you usually have someone enforcing them. So how is this place governed?
Well, the text explicitly says there is no formal autocracy. In fact, it claims that the community cannot possibly walk the path of autocracy. When the FAQ asks who the leader is, the answer is, well, all of those people who are able to live their life in strict accordance with Lifechanyuan value can be the leaders.
I have to push back on that. Relying purely on conscience and values to govern a society sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It does sound idealistic, yeah.
Because human nature doesn't just evaporate because you cross a threshold into a utopia. Historically, every commune that tried to replace hard rules with, good vibes ended up collapsing. Does the text actually explain how this conscience is maintained? Or is it just relying on magical thinking? Like, what happens when someone just decides they don't want to work today? What happens to laziness?
What's fascinating here is how the author anticipates that exact skepticism. When asked what happens if someone becomes lazy, the author says it's simply impossible.
Impossible. It's a bold claim.
It is a really bold claim. But the logic is that the people who have been baptized by these values have profound wisdom, clear and bright minds.
Oh.
The argument is that if they were to become lazy, their own internal conscience would make them physically and psychologically too uncomfortable to sustain it. The author is assuming that if you change the internal operating system of the human being through this rigorous half-year filtering process, you simply don't need the external operating system of laws, police, and managers.
So it's basically a highly exclusive, invite-only club where the only bouncer is your own conscience. It relies entirely on the assumption of a perfectly filtered population, like they've aggressively weeded out anyone who would need a boss.
Precisely. They are filtering for a highly specific psychological profile, people who are intrinsically motivated by the collective good rather than, extrinsically motivated by fear of punishment.
Okay, so you've gathered your Raijin crops. You have a society of perfectly aligned celestials, driven strictly by their bright minds. But even celestials need to take out the trash, right?
They do.
How do they handle the messy day-to-day reality of chores and property? How does the economy actually function?
This is where the text proposes a radical leveling of society. First and foremost, there is absolutely no private property. Zero. Everything belongs to the public.
Which usually implies a total loss of privacy. If I don't own the roof over my head, does the collective just have free reign over my personal space? Like, can anyone just walk into my room?
You would naturally assume that, but the author draws a very sharp, deliberate line here. While you own no physical property, individual privacy is considered sacred and inviolable.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Every single person gets their own separate bedroom, bathroom, and private area, and nobody, absolutely nobody, is allowed to enter without the explicit permission of the person who lives there.
So you have your completely private sanctuary, but you own nothing. Let's talk about work then. If I have no property to maintain, how do I earn my keep?
You don't earn a living in any traditional sense, because work is entirely equalized. The text states there is no nobleness or lowliness in work. The remunerations paid to the members are exactly the same, no matter what task you perform.
So if I'm sitting in a comfortable office crunching numbers, or if I am physically exhausted scrubbing the communal toilets, I am compensated exactly the same.
Exactly the same. Office work, trading, growing vegetables, cooking, washing clothes, it is all deemed fundamentally equal in value because it all keeps the community alive.
Which leads to my absolute favorite part of this entire blueprint, the division of labor. The text says the goal is for every person to do exactly one trade.
Just one.
That is wild. It's not just like an ant colony. It operates on a similar mechanism. I mean, in an ant colony, you have chemical signaling. The worker ant doesn't need a boss to tell it to forage because it's biologically compelled by the colony's pheromones. Here, the text is engineering a hyper-specialized gig economy.
That's a great way to put it.
Right, because if you are the vegetable gardener, you never have to clean your own room. If you are the dairy woman milking the cows, you never have to wash your own clothes. The businessman never has to cook his own meals. Imagine that for a second. Think about your own life. Imagine literally never having to wash a dish, fold laundry, or vacuum ever again because you traded all those micro chores for your one specific hyper-focused skill.
It's a brilliant way to remove the daily friction of survival. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how this mechanism completely dismantles class structures.
No, so?
Well, in the secular world, we tie human value directly to the financial value of labor. A CEO is deemed more valuable than a janitor because their labor generates more capital. By making all compensations strictly equal and specializing tasks so intensely, the community removes the very concept of a financial hierarchy.
But wait, if everything pays the exact same, why would anyone volunteer to scrub the toilets? Human nature dictates we seek the path of least resistance. Why wouldn't everyone just choose the easiest, most comfortable job?
The FAQ actually anticipates that question. The text relies again on the beautiful minds of the members. It claims that people in this community will actually voluntarily step up to do the jobs that no one in secular society wants to do.
And the mechanism for that is what? Because their conscience compels them to.
Partly conscience, yes, but mostly it's a new kind of currency, social respect.
Oh, okay.
Just like the ant colony relies on pheromones, this society relies on social signaling. The text says that the people who take on these undesirable, difficult jobs will receive greater respect and admiration from the entire group. So social currency entirely replaces financial reward as the ultimate motivator.
That is fascinating. You are trading a paycheck for status. But I did catch one strange detail in the text. Well, everything is publicly owned and all pay is equal. It mentions that everyone gets an appropriate amount of pocket money.
Yes, it does.
That feels like a contradiction. Why have money at all in a moneyless utopia?
That is a great catch, and it's a very clever psychological mechanism by the author. The inclusion of pocket money in a Marxist-style moneyless society is a pressure release valve.
Oh, interesting.
The author realizes that absolute collectivism can crush individual identity. By giving members a small amount of pocket money for personal hobbies, the text satisfies that base human itch for personal agency. It gives you the ability to buy a specific book or your favorite brand of tea without allowing you to accumulate enough wealth to recreate the class divides they just abolished.
Okay, so you have a little walking around money, but all your basic survival needs are met. You've completely removed financial hierarchy. But in the secular world, the main reason we hoard finances, the main reason we stress over money, is to protect and pass wealth down to our families.
Right, exactly.
So if you eliminate money, you naturally have to ask, what happens to the family structure that relied on that money to survive?
And this is where the blueprint takes its most extreme pivot. It doesn't just restructure the family, it explicitly forbids it. I mean, the very title of the document is The Home Without Marriage and Family. In this community, the text states plainly, they neither marry nor get married.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about how that would actually play out for you as the listener. Imagine taking the person you've built your entire life with, the person you love, walking up to these gates and having to consciously agree that from this moment on, your exclusive bond is void.
It's a huge leap.
You are now just two independent individuals who happen to live in the same commune. Can a married couple even join?
They can enter, and the text actually says it's best if they enter together. However, one spouse cannot enter without the written consent of the other. But here is the hard reality. Once they cross the threshold into the home, their marriage life officially comes to an end.
You are literally signing a divorce paper at the door.
Essentially, yes. The legal and social institution of marriage dissolves completely. Now, the text clarifies that the couple can choose to continue an intimate relationship if they want to. That is nobody else's business, but the formal, exclusive tie of marriage and all the obligations that come with it are gone.
Which opens up a very complex, frankly radical discussion about intimacy in this community. The FAQ outlines a system of complete sexual freedom, doesn't it?
It does. It states that people can choose their sexual arrangements based entirely on personal taste, as long as it is strictly consensual. It explicitly mentions pairs, triads, or even four people engaging together.
The logic provided in the text for why this is acceptable is wild. It says this freedom is perfectly fine as long as people feel gratitude to the greatest creator in their heart.
Right.
The philosophy seems to be, if this freedom makes them love life more and work harder for human happiness, then why on earth restrict it? But I have to ask, doesn't the author address the obvious pushback? In secular society, a vast majority of people would look at that and call it promiscuity.
The author does address it, and he does it by completely redefining the word. The text claims the secular concept of promiscuity is fundamentally wrong.
How so?
According to the document, promiscuity only applies to incestuous relationships between parents and children, or between siblings. If there is no genetic connection, the text argues it is simply a game for fun. It compares it to assembling a crowd for a conference, a sports activity, or a dance.
Wow, that is a massive paradigm shift. But then the author draws a really, really hard line. He insists that this sexual freedom is only acceptable inside the home, and it absolutely should not be copied, advocated for, or practiced in the outside secular world.
This raises an important question about the text's internal logic. Like, why is this behavior morally acceptable, even encouraged inside the utopia, but considered disastrous outside of it?
Yeah, why the double standard?
The author's logic hinges entirely on the structure of the family. In the secular world, families are built on strict spousal ties and financial dependence. If sexual freedom happens there, it shatters the trust of the spouse, it hurts the children, it devastates the parents, and it ultimately destabilizes the fabric of society.
Right, because secular society is built on those specific bonds. If you break them, it creates emotional and financial wreckage.
Exactly. But in the home, there are no families to break. There are no marriages to betray. The text says that before entering the community, members must have paid off all their debts to their parents, to their children, to their friends, and to society.
Debts. That is such an interesting, telling word choice. It frames the traditional family not as a loving support system, but as a series of heavy obligations and ledgers that have to be balanced.
That is the absolute core of Xu Feng's philosophy here. Traditional families create emotional and financial debts. You owe your parents for raising you. You owe your children an inheritance. This utopia can only function if those debts are left behind at the door. You enter as a blank slate, owing nothing to anyone except the collective.
Which brings up the most obvious, profound debt of all. Children. What happens if people in this community have babies? You can't just ignore a newborn. Do they just leave the babies at the door too?
The text says having children is entirely up to the individual. But if a child is born, the mechanism of ownership shifts completely. They do not belong to the biological parents.
Wait, if they don't belong to the parents, who do they belong to?
The document states, the baby is the sweetheart of the whole human beings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. From the exact moment of pregnancy, all costs, all future raising, all medical care, and all education are handled and paid for collectively by the home. The child belongs to everyone. The community is the parent.
So what does this all mean? If you zoom out and look at the whole picture, the community itself has completely absorbed the role of the family, which, logically, makes sense. With the traditional nuclear family gone, the community has no choice but to step in and provide the entire safety net from cradle to grave.
It is a total, comprehensive replacement of the social safety net. Let's look at daily survival, like food. Because you're only doing one trade, you don't cook in your private rooms, everyone eats together in a massive communal cafeteria.
And the FAQ specifies that the cafeteria caters to everyone's individual tastes. If you're vegetarian, you eat vegetarian. If you like meat, you eat meat. But there is one very specific, non-negotiable rule about the food, right?
Yes, there is absolutely no eating of wild animals or birds. That is strictly forbidden.
Okay, so your meals are handled. What about the terrifying parts of life? Sickness, getting old, losing your physical independence.
The mechanisms for that are completely outsourced as well. Medical care is entirely free. The text promises that doctors and nurses will provide meticulous care to anyone who gets sick.
And what if you can't work anymore?
If someone loses the capacity to work due to age or illness, they aren't left to fend for themselves or drain their savings because, well, they don't have savings. The text says they will be cared for by the most careful and sympathetic people in the community.
And even death. The text says special organizations handle all funeral arrangements, so there is literally no need to worry. When I read that, it finally clicked for me. It really is like living permanently on an all-inclusive cruise ship. But instead of just outsourcing your vacation, you are outsourcing your entire existence. Every fundamental human anxiety. How am I going to afford health care? Who's going to take care of me when I'm old? Who will feed my kids? All of it is completely outsourced to the collective.
It's a fascinating observation because there's an incredible paradox at the heart of this entire blueprint. On one hand, it mandates extreme communal reliance. You eat in a communal dining hall, you own no property, your children are raised by the collective, and your labor belongs entirely to the group.
But on the other hand,
there is this intense, almost aggressive protection of individual freedom. You have a completely private, sacred bedroom that no one can enter. You are free to choose your one specific trade without being forced into labor you hate. You have total sexual freedom. You even get pocket money to indulge in your own quirks. It is a highly engineered attempt to synthesize total Marxist-style collectivism with extreme, almost libertarian individualism.
And who exactly does the author think is going to be living in this paradoxical utopia? Did the text mention anything about the demographics? Because it's a very specific worldview.
It did, and the prediction is quite surprising. Despite the text being written in Chinese by a Chinese author, it predicts that Chinese people will actually be a minority in the community. It expects the majority of the members to be white, black, or of other races.
Really? Why would the author think that?
Yeah.
Does the text imply that Western cultures are more individualistic and therefore more primed to want this kind of blank slate freedom?
That's a very strong interpretation. It suggests the author recognizes that traditional, deeply ingrained collective family structures, like those prominent in many Asian cultures, might actually be harder to break down than the more atomized, individualistic cultures of the West. It shows the author views this not as a regional movement, but as a global restructuring of humanity, specifically targeting those who might feel the most burdened by modern secular isolation.
So let's bring this all together. We started with a blank whiteboard, and the picture that Xu Feng has drawn on it is the home without marriage and family. It is a massive, radical thought experiment. To even enter, you must be spiritually and ideologically filtered so thoroughly that your own internal conscience replaces the police force. Once inside, you trade away the nuclear family, you trade away private wealth, and you literally sign away your marriage at the door.
And in return for giving up those traditional pillars of human existence, you are promised total communal security. You get free healthcare, hyper-specialized labor, where you only do the one job you actually like, a completely private sanctuary to sleep in, and a life entirely free from the emotional and financial debts of the secular world.
It really makes you evaluate the friction in your own life.
Yeah.
Think about it. Think about the secular world you are living in right now listening to this. The endless chores, the mounting financial stress, the deep, sometimes painful complexities of family obligations. How much of that friction would you be willing to trade away for this kind of guaranteed cradle-to-grave support? Would you give up owning your own home or the exclusive bond of a marriage if it meant you never, ever had to worry about a medical bill, a mortgage, or making dinner again?
It is the ultimate trade-off between traditional autonomy and total, enveloping security. But it leaves us with a lingering question, one that the text doesn't quite answer. If a community successfully removes every single financial, familial, and survival anxiety from modern life, what happens next? If you erase all the old rules on that whiteboard and the only thing governing society is the internal conscience of its members, what entirely new, unforeseen anxieties might emerge in the silence that follows?
A perfect blank slate. But maybe, just maybe, a blank slate is the most terrifying thing of all.